Hello and welcome to Being Prodigy. Now put on your headphones and start learning. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description.
In the early 19th century, factories increasingly became an intimate part of the English landscape. So visible were the imposing new mills, so magical seemed to be the power of new technology, that contemporaries were dazzled. They concentrated their attention on the mills, are almost forgetting the bylanes in the workshops where production still continued. The pace of industrial change. How rapid was the process of industrialization? Does industrialization mean only the growth of factory industries? First, the most dynamic industries in Britain were clearly cotton and metals. Growing at a rapid pace, cotton was the leading sector in the first phase of industrialization up to the 1840s. After that, the iron and steel industry led the way. With the expansion of railways, in England from the 1840s and in the colonies from the 1860s, the demand for iron and steel increased rapidly. By 1873, Britain was exporting iron and steel worth about 77 million British pounds, double the value of its cotton export. Second, the new industries could not easily displace traditional industries. Even at the end of the 19th century, less than 20% of the total workforce was employed in technologically advanced industrial sectors. Textiles was a dynamic sector, but a large portion of the output was produced not within factories, but outside, within domestic units. Third, the pace of change in the traditional industries was not set by steam-powered cotton or metal industries, but they did not remain entirely stagnant either. Seemingly ordinary and small innovations were the basis of growth in many non-mechanized sectors such as food processing, building, pottery, glasswork, tanning, furniture making, and production of implements. Fourth, technological changes occurred slowly. They did not spread dramatically across the industrial landscape. New technology was expensive and merchants and industrialists were cautious about using it. The machines often broke down and repair was costly. They were not as effective as their inventors and manufacturers claimed. Consider the case of the steam engine. James Watt improved the steam engine produced by Newcomen and patented the new engine in 1781. His industrialist friend Matthew Boulton manufactured the new model, but for years he could find no buyers. At the beginning of the 19th century, there were no more than 321 steam engines all over England. Of these, 80 were in cotton industries, 9 in wool industries, and the rest in mining, canal works and iron works. Steam engines were not used in any of the other industries till much later in the century, so even the most powerful new technology that enhanced the productivity of labor manifold was slow to be accepted by industrialists.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description, and please subscribe to show your support.
Historians now have come to increasingly recognize that the typical worker in the mid-19th century was not a machine operator but the traditional craftsperson and laborer. Hand labor and steam power. In Victorian Britain there was no shortage of human labor. Poor peasants and vagrants moved to the cities in large numbers in search of jobs, waiting for work. As you will know, when there is plenty of labor, wages are low, so industrialists had no problem of labor shortage or high wage costs. They did not want to introduce machines that got rid of human labor and required large capital investment. In many industries the demand for labor was seasonal. Gasworks and breweries were especially busy through the cold months, so they needed more workers to meet their peak demand. Bookbinders and printers, catering to Christmas demand, too needed extra hands before December. At the waterfront, winter was the time that ships were repaired and spruced up. In all such industries where production fluctuated with the season, industrialists usually preferred hand labor, employing workers for the season. A range of products could be produced only with hand labor. Machines were oriented to producing uniforms, standardized goods for a mass market, but the demand in the market was often for goods with intricate designs and specific shapes. In mid-19th century Britain, for instance, 500 varieties of hammers were produced and 45 kinds of axes. These required human skill, not mechanical technology. In Victorian Britain, the upper classes, the aristocrats and the bourgeoisie, preferred things produced by hand. Handmade products came to symbolize refinement and class. They were better finished, individually produced, and carefully designed. Machine-made goods were for export to the colonies. In countries with labor shortage, industrialists were keen on using mechanical power so that the need for human labor can be minimized. This was the case in 19th century America. Britain, however, had no problem hiring human hands. Life of the workers. The abundance of labor in the market affected the lives of workers. As news of possible jobs traveled to the countryside, hundreds tramped to the cities. The actual possibility of getting a job depended on existing networks of friendship and kin relations. If you had a relative or a friend in a factory, you were more likely to get a job quickly. But not everyone had social connections. Many job seekers had to wait weeks, spending nights under bridges or in night shelters. Some stayed in night refuges that were set up by private individuals. Others went to the casual wards maintained by the poor law authorities. Seasonality of work in many industries meant prolonged periods without work. After the busy season was over, the poor were on the streets again. Some returned to the countryside after the winter, when the demand for labor in the rural areas opened up in places. But most looked for odd jobs, which till the mid-19th century were difficult to find.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description. And please subscribe to show your support.
Wages increased somewhat in the early 19th century, but they tell us little about the welfare of the workers. The average figures hide the variations between trades and the fluctuations from year to year. For instance, when prices rose sharply during the prolonged Napoleonic War, the real value of what the workers earned fell significantly, since the same wages could now buy fewer things. Moreover, the income of workers depended not on the wage rate alone. What was also critical was the period of employment. The number of days of work determined the average daily income of the workers. At the best of times till the mid-19th century, about 10% of the urban population were extremely poor. In periods of economic slump, like the 1830s, the proportion of unemployed went up to anything between 35 and 75% in different regions. The fear of unemployment made workers hostile to the introduction of new technology. When the spinning jenny was introduced in the woolen industry, women who survived on hand spinning began attacking the new machines. This conflict over the introduction of the jenny continued for a long time. After the 1840s, building activity intensified in the cities, opening up greater opportunities of employment. Roads were widened, new railway stations came up, railway lines were extended, tunnels dug, drainage and sewers laid, rivers embanked. The number of workers employed in the transport industry doubled in the 1840s, and doubled again in the subsequent 30 years. Industrialization in the colonies. Let us now move to India to see how a colony industrializes. Once again we will look not only at factory industries but also at the non-mechanized sector. We will limit our discussion primarily to textile industries. The age of Indian textiles before the age of machine industries. Silk and cotton goods from India dominated the international market in textiles. Coarser cottons were produced in many countries, but the finer varieties often came from India. Armenian and Persian merchants took the goods from Punjab to Afghanistan, eastern Persia and Central Asia. Bales of fine textiles were carried on camel-back via the northwest frontier, through mountain passes and across deserts. A vibrant sea trade operated through the main pre-colonial ports. Surat on the Gujarat coast connected India to the Gulf and Red Sea ports. Masulipatam on the Coromandel coast and Hooghly in Bengal had trade links with Southeast Asian ports. A variety of Indian merchants and bankers were involved in this network of export trade, financing production, carrying goods and supplying exporters. Supply merchants linked the port towns to the inland regions. They gave advances to weavers, procured the woven cloth from weaving villages, and carried the supply to the ports. At the port, the big shippers and export merchants had brokers who negotiated the price and bought goods from the supply merchants operating inland. By the 1750s, this network, controlled by Indian merchants, was breaking down. The European companies gradually gained power, first securing a variety of concessions from local courts, then the monopoly rights to trade. This resulted in a decline of the old ports of Surat and Hooghly through which local merchants had operated.
This is Being Prodigy. To get special study material, just contact us through the link in the description. And please subscribe to show your support. Thank you and happy learning.